I'm going to get into trouble for making this video because, heaven forbid, I realize that I have nuanced views about Ukraine. And this is something you're not allowed to have on 2025 internet. People need to be extremely pure when talking about modern subjects. You're either 100% for or you're 100% against, because this way you guarantee that only half of the people will attack you. If you have nuanced views, then both people attack you, both people freak out. And this is probably why, as I mentioned in a previous video, if you go on the internet and you look for people to talk about Ukraine, you only get two versions. The first version is the pro-Russian side, right? Like you have a content creator that will be like, the green t-shirt is yet again making a horrible decision. I do not understand why his troops are now invading Russia. Obviously, I, as a general with strong military experience, know that his troops are better deployed into the front. But my friend, make no mistake, he is only doing this for the cameras, because at the end of the day, the green t-shirt is just an actor. Haha. Right? So that's one type of view where Russia will end the war any day now. The entire West is completely incompetent. All of our civilization, all of our military might, everything that we do is for naught, because the Russians have discovered secret manufacturing techniques, important ways on how they can guarantee their economic prosperity using only their country, and they can pretty much like face off a Zerg attack from the rest of the world. And so what the rest of the Western world has to do is to disband NATO, disband our militaries, dismantle our nuclear arsenals, and then just stay home and shut the fuck up because we don't know anything about geopolitics. So this is like one type of channel that you find. The other type of channel is the one that's pro-Western, and you have the impression that any day now Ukrainian troops are going to be in Moscow, surrounded by an army of drones in the horizon, and that they're going to arrest Putin and they're going to drag him to justice, and then there's going to be fair elections in Russia, and they're going to have democracy. So this is like the type of mindsets that you're allowed to have. Anything with nuance, anything that's like a little bit, hold on, maybe it's not like this, maybe it's different. No. And people are very passionate about this, by the way. Like, if you disagree with someone, they're acting as if they themselves are in the front lines, and they themselves are an expert in Russian economics and Ukrainian economics, and they have the charts, they've been there at the central command, they saw the statistics, they see everything, and they know better than you. Obviously, my take is that in any nation under conflict, there is a fog of war. And both factions are struggling, not just militarily, not just on the battlefield, but they're also struggling in the propaganda effort, because propaganda is crucial in any type of war throughout human history, because you want to moralize your troops, and you want to demoralize the enemy. You want to make the enemy troops feel as if they can't win, that the war is pointless, that their leaders are bad and corrupt. And at the same time, you want to make your own soldiers feel as if they managed to hold on just for a couple of weeks longer. They're going to win. Victory is just around the corner. We're going to get them. The propaganda, I would say, is actually sometimes, not all the times, but like sometimes more important than the actual situation on the ground. Because troops that have high morale fight better. Troops that have low morale, they lose, even though they may have the advantage. There's a lot of historical battles where a stronger force actually lost because of low morale. And so it makes sense, like all of this propaganda campaign is absolutely necessary. Like it is actually part of the conflict. And because of the propaganda campaign, it's actually very difficult to know what the situation is. And so the way I analyze things is that I look at it through different factions that have competing interests. So it's not just Zelenskyy. There are different factions in Ukraine. It's not just the West. There are different factions in the West that have various interests that align one way or the other. Some are cynical, some maybe even ideological, some even historical nature, right? Like historical grievances may contribute to the way a nation views this conflict. And so if a Baltic country doesn't want to have a border with Russia, there's no ideological argument that you can use. There's no financial argument that you can use. Like, no, like they don't want to have a border with Russia, period. So unless you find a way for that not to happen, you can't persuade them to be against Ukraine. Like, this is how the actual geopolitics work. And once you understand that, you have a seat at the adults table. If you don't understand that, then you're like, oh, but green fish. Okay, like, go to the kids table and talk to the kids. Now, let's talk a little bit about the current conflict and the way I see it. And again, this is just my personal take. I don't know if I'm right or not, but at least you guys know that no one is paying me to say these things. And you can usually tell if someone is not being paid if they have a nuanced take. Because usually a shill, right, like who's paid to shill will have like 100% take in one side or another. So this is my analysis of what happens, right? So like, let's start with the invasion itself. Like Russia is invading Ukraine. There's lead up to this, there's other things that can be told before this, but like, let's pick this point so that the video doesn't take an hour. From my assessment, I think Russia believed that what happened in Crimea would happen in Ukraine. Because a little earlier, Russia invaded Crimea, everyone just surrendered. The international conflict wasn't that bad because like Russia got sanctions, but no one actually applied them, so like the sanctions were in paper only. And it was a very easy way to navigate through Crimea and then take it. The problem with Ukraine is that a lot of the money that Russia has given to various officials in Ukraine, to various mayors and other individuals that should have defected when the Russians invaded, the money was pocketed because guess what? Ukraine is a corrupt nation. And on top of that, like the Ukrainian people themselves, especially the ones that traveled to Poland and went to Poland and saw how awesome Poland is compared to their country, and even better, like compared to how things are in rural Russia, they reacted in a very negative light when the Russians invaded to liberate them from the decadent West. Like, you want to do what now? Like, we don't want to look like rural Russia. We're going to take the decadence if we're going to look even halfway the way Poland looks. And so they decided to fight. Say whatever you want about the green t-shirt and his corruption and whatever, but at the end of the day, he didn't fled. Like, if the man was actually captured in Kiev by the Russian forces, he would have either been imprisoned for life in a gulag or he would have been executed. And so it does take a lot of balls to actually stay and fight. Now, the invasion itself, a lot of people are trying to spin it now, which is like post-happening cope. You know, hindsight is 2020, and they're saying, well, yeah, but like the invasion, was it actually supposed to take Kiev? Was it actually supposed to do a regime change? Right, so like you're trying to tell me that Russia wanted to waste the life of hundreds of thousands of its citizens out of compassion, empathy, and restraint. No, like, obviously they wanted to go in and change the regime in Kiev and arrest Zelenskyy and everyone else. But that didn't happen. And the reason that I know they wanted to do this is because they actually published an article by mistake. Like, for those of you who remember, that was a big scandal at the time. They published an article in an official Russian press, which is usually the PR arm of the government, saying that we have achieved victory. Our goal has always been to unite our Russian brothers. And how did the West think that Ukraine will ever be theirs? Like, these are our brothers along with Belarus, and we want to create the big Russia. It was basically an article oozing with Duginism. Like, for those of you who don't know who Dugin is, he's one of the greatest Russian philosophers of our time that understands geopolitics probably better than any other Russian alive. I don't know if we're lucky or unlucky that we don't have a Dugin on our side. Probably for the best, because if you had a person that's so insightful into how to create propaganda that would work for the European Union and would push for like a European Union manifest destiny, it may actually not be well for the people that happen to live in those interesting times. But anyway, right, like Dugin does want Russia über alles, right? Like he wants Russia to dominate as a global superpower and also as a power in Europe. I don't blame him. I mean, he's a Russian. That's his nationalism. However, that article, which claimed victory and was supposed to be released a couple of weeks after the invasion, was reeking of that ideology. And the article was published by a mistake. Like usually articles in the mainstream press that are talking about important events like this, they're written before the event happens. They're fact-checked, and then a lot of teams and PR people are looking through the article in order to make sure that it's going to drive home the point and cause as much passion with the citizens when they read it. And so, like, the article is locked and loaded. It's ready to go. Now, I don't know what happened. Maybe a glitch in the system, but, like, the article was released. The public did get to see it, and then it was taken down. So, like, the notion that Russia didn't try to conquer Ukraine is ridiculous. Now, obviously, you know, they I don't know if they wanted to color the borders with the Russian flag, but they didn't want to change the government, that's for sure. And so, to everyone's surprise, including the Americans who were expecting a guerrilla war in Russia, the Ukrainians actually hold up, and they managed to hold up for a couple of weeks. And then when that happened, the Americans went like, okay, well, let's start pumping weapons into the area, right? Like, let's do what the Russians did to us in Vietnam. Exactly the same thing. And so, with the Biden administration, they started sending help into Ukraine. And all of this took place until the Ukrainians and the Russians wanted to strike a deal. Like, they came to the table and they wanted to make a deal. Now, Boris Johnson, with the blessings of Joe Biden, goes to Ukraine and talks to the Ukrainian Central Command and tells them, look, don't sign the deal. We will actually help you. Like, we will provide, I don't know what he said, but I assume, like he said, we will provide you with NATO troops, we will provide you with weapons, and we're probably going to try and send in some people to train your soldiers, and, right? Probably even a bribe, because that's how it works in Eastern Europe. I can't guarantee it, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people that agreed to that receive some money in some bank accounts. Again, like the same shit that happened to the Russians when their bribes were gone. You just need to understand how things work over here, right? Like, this is just, like for us, corruption is open source. But anyway, when this happened, the Ukrainians were like, okay, well, we're going to accept the deal. If the West is backing us, they probably crunched the numbers, they looked at the math, and it's like, well, with the sanctions and with the help from the West and with all of that, maybe we can hold out. Maybe we can take back our territories. And for a while, it seemed possible. However, it turns out that modern warfare isn't as everyone predicted. It's actually all about trench warfare, stalemates, and drones. Lots of drones. And trench warfare again. So it's very similar to World War I. And so the front got stuck. And a lot of people died. And in this war of attrition, what matters is who has more people. So in this situation, obviously, the Russians have more people because they're a larger nation. While the other question is like, who has more artillery? That's what matters in a war of attrition. Who has more artillery? Who has more drones? And up until now, the Biden administration genuinely kept their promise. They were supporting the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, however, America is a democracy, and a problem with democracy is that the foreign policy changes, not all the time, but usually when a new administration takes hold. And so the Trump administration views things differently. From an American perspective, like, why did the Biden administration help Ukraine? Because I hear the Russian thing, it's like, well, because corruption and they have their piggy bank in Ukraine. It's like, come on, the Democrats have their piggy bank throughout the entire world. This is just one country. No, the reason that they're actually interested in Ukraine is not for Ukraine itself, but is the fact that Russia is stuck in Ukraine. Like, they are being grinded in Ukraine as we speak. And the Russian economy is suffering because of the sanctions, not on a short term, but on a long term. And so, like, from the American perspective, which are afraid of a Russian-Chinese alliance, they're like, okay, well, we weren't going to fuck with Russia directly like this. But if the Russians decided to take the bait and they went into Ukraine and it doesn't cost us a single American soldier, why not take advantage of the situation? And this is what Crenshaw actually said on Fox News. Like, he went on Fox News and he said, well, the reason we are supporting this is because not a single American has to die. And he was condemned for his speech because it's like, dude, are you insane? Like, what about the lives of the Ukrainians? Well, I don't think the American politician like generally cares because he's not on the front line. He's not there, right? Like for him, it's statistics, which is pretty much similar for all politicians. But like from a cold, calculated point of view, like okay, the Bashar al-Assad regime fell in Syria because Russia was busy in Ukraine. You have the prospect of now getting the rare earth minerals from Ukraine after the war, which is a massive strategic opportunity because right now America imports a lot from China, which again, China is the competitor for the world hegemon. And at any point, China can ban America from importing more rare earth minerals, which is something that they already did for a couple of them. They also managed to grind the Russians, right? Like they also managed to damage their economy. They also managed to sell gas to Europe, like something that Europe wouldn't have taken at the price because they were having cheap gas from Russia. They managed to destabilize another competitor in Germany by having the German pipeline just suddenly vanish. Like from an American point of view, this is money well spent. They got more of a return on investment on their dollar than they lost. Again, like thinking like a cynical politician that just looks at the stats, doesn't care about human suffering, doesn't care about ideology, right? Like it's at the grown-ups table, not at the kids table. They don't see a problem with this. And not to mention, Russia didn't take Kiev, right? Like they still have that area. And for Ukraine itself, like it actually managed to hold its territories. Sure, like it's going to lose land. But if nothing happened, if they didn't do anything, they would have ended up in the same way that Crimea ended up. Now, the interesting part is that Crimea actually has people that are pro-Russian and people that are even ethnically Russian. But if you take, like, the Western Ukraine and you put it in Russia, it would be suffering, guerrilla warfare, so on and so forth. And so, you have a new administration right now, which is the Trump administration. And the Trump administration, again, because America is a democracy, it means that the foreign politics can change. And the Trump administration either thinks that enough is enough, like they managed to take their win, like let's cut it here, let's not pursue it forward. Or maybe like Trump genuinely is a man that likes peace. Like this is also a possibility. You know, a lot of people that I talk with about analyzing geopolitical conflicts and strategy, we usually go way too cynical, right? So we don't care about the number of people that die. We don't care about any of this. It's like geopolitical. It's like how much land, how many units, how many soldiers, right? But the reality is that there may actually be human beings out there that aren't this cynical. And they're like, well, shit, like this is a war. Millions are dying. It's not good. Let's put an end to it, right? Like, let's see what it takes. And so now you have Trump, which is coming in, and he's not negotiating on behalf of Ukraine. He's negotiating on behalf of the United States of America. Like, he's not really interested at all about Europe. He's not interested about Ukraine. No, like, what he is interested in, how can the United States gain from this? And apparently, this is my take from noticing what he is doing. His interest is to make it so that America and Russia become partners again. Right, like he wants Visa and MasterCard to start doing business with Russia. He wants American companies to work with Russian gas companies. He wants trade to resume. He wants like everything to go back to the way it was before. And now, like obviously, he's going to try to appease the Russians. He's not going to give them Kiev. I don't think so. However, he is definitely going to negotiate on this new behalf that America and Russia moving forward are not going to be in a Cold War, but they're going to have maybe not pleasant relations, but at least neutral relations, right? And so, like, this mindfucks the European Union because up until now, the European Union doesn't have a foreign policy. The European Union does what America does. And again, if you look at a nation as an individual, it doesn't make sense. Like, why did he change his mind like that? It's disrespectful. But the reality is that America is a genuine democracy. Like they unironic, and we can see it now through the foreign policy, right? Like they had the previous administration that did it one way, and the second administration is doing it 180 degrees the other way. And so the European Union is cucked and really annoyed because they also spent money into Ukraine. They also invested into political capital so that they can convince their population on why the war is important. And they even made statements like Western civilization hangs in the balance with this conflict, right? And so now they're placed in a position where their population can be demoralized, like especially left-leaning people in Britain. They can view their leaders as being inefficient. They can view their leaders as being lacking of strength and power, right? So they're creating a lot of, like, the Americans are creating a lot of chaos in Europe with this decision. The Ukrainians are obviously livid because it's like, well, you guys promised that you will help us, right? Like, we had a deal. We were going to sign a peace, but you came in and you said, like, you're guaranteeing our safety and blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, it's the other interesting thing, and I believe that Trump actually wants to use Zelenskyy as a pawn. I may be wrong. We'll see. But this whole pressuring, it's like, let's have elections in Ukraine. Well, right, and calling Zelenskyy a dictator. Now, from my knowledge of human history, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I couldn't find a single country on Earth throughout any time period in history that held elections while a foreign army is within their borders. So, like, you're having a state of war, and you're having the enemy troops onto your soil, and you're holding elections. The only country that did this is Romania during the World War. That's it. Like, that's the only one I found. Now, I may be wrong, right? Like, if you guys can think of another nation that did this, right? Like, you're in a state of military conflict, and on top of that, like, just being at war isn't enough. No, on top of that, you have foreign troops onto your soil. The reason is obvious, right? Like, it's a logistical nightmare. How are you going to do it? How are you going to make sure that everyone gets to vote when your people are currently engaging with the enemy? And then you, like, how do you take the votes from the front without having them being bombed or burnt or, right? Like, without having, like, even then you have, like, a percentage under the enemy occupation, right? Like, a part of your country that has citizens that should be able to vote, they're under enemy occupation. How the fuck do you think that the enemy is not going to stack the ballots then? Like obviously, the cities and the rural areas and the places that are behind the enemy lines, because they're still your citizens, they should still be voting, right? Well, they will go to the city hall, they will vote, and then the enemy can just throw away the ballots and then, like, stack them with their favorite candidate, right? So, like, how would you prevent that from happening? That's why, like, nations do not vote under warfare, like when the enemy troops has already claimed their territory. And I'm pretty sure, like, Trump knows this. And so the question is, like, why does he want Zelenskyy gone? And I'm thinking, again, I may be wrong, but I'm thinking it's going to be a bargaining chip. Like, part of the peace plan would be deport Zelenskyy to us, or exile Zelenskyy somewhere. I don't know. You probably won't be able to do this if he's president. But if he's not president, then yeah, you can have him as a peace offering. So again, like when you look at the conflict, you don't look at this is good, this is bad. No, it's like various factions with different interests. Because for Russia to stop the war, they need to save face so that their regime doesn't collapse, right? Like, they lost hundreds of thousands of people. They need to show that they gained something for it. And it's not Putin, it's like the oligarchs, the people in power, the people in charge, the regime, if you will. The Americans, like Donald Trump, right? Like, he needs to show to his base, which is the only thing he cares about. Like, he doesn't care about the Europeans, he doesn't care about the Ukrainians, he doesn't care about anyone else besides the people that vote for him. That's his mindset, right? It's like, how do I please the MAGA people? What do I give to the MAGA people so that they keep supporting me? And apparently, like, if he manages to say, yeah, we have secured the $500 billion of rare earth minerals and we have ended the war and blah, 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 then they're happy, right? And sure, the Europeans are livid and people in Congress, the Democrats will be fuming. But at the end of the day, if his base is happy and come next election they will vote Republican, then the Republican Party is happy. That's all he cares about. And so we can moralize and criticize and fume as much as we want, but this is the reality. This is what's happening, and this is what I'm describing. A lot of people get upset when I'm describing the happenings. Like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to lie to you? Do you want me to tell you Orange Man bad? Would that make it okay? Like, would that stop the events from happening? No. I'm just describing as best as I can and as objectively as I can what's going on right now through my limited understanding. Now, the other thing that he is doing, and this one is a very effective strategy, is to ask him something that you should never ask any government on earth, which is, where did the money go? Like, it's a crime against nature to ask such a thing of a government. Normally, right, like the natural order of things, like Jesus Christ intended, is for the government to ask you where is the money, right? Like, you, the taxpayer, the government should ask you, like, what did you do with the money? Where is it? But to ask this from a government, it's insane. Like, it's a crime against nature. And this is the position that Trump has now placed Zelenskyy in, because, again, it's not just Zelenskyy, right? Like, you don't run a nation with a person, you run a nation with a group of people, with a faction. And it's Eastern Europe at the end of the day. Russia does it. Like, Russia had this problem with the military. Ukraine does. Every single Eastern European country does it. And throughout human history, by the way, like, I remember when my country was fighting against the Ottoman hordes, and the money was being kept from us, like the Pope was gathering funds from Western Europe, and the money would kind of stop flowing through Poland. It would kind of stop flowing through Hungary. You know, like, it is what it is. Like, this is normal in this geographical area. And so he's hitting him with this, and he doesn't seem to have a response. And so we'll see what happens. I predict that what will happen is, like, whatever the White House and the Kremlin are going to negotiate, that's what's going to take place. In the future, yeah, I do think that relationships between Europe and the United States may be strained. Like, in the future, if the United States wants to go to war with someone, Europe will say, well, you know what? Maybe it's not our conflict. Maybe we should stay out of this one. Or maybe we should support the opposite side. Why the fuck not? Trollolololo. You know, like it's possible. I don't know. But what I do know is that we are witnessing historical events. Like, there is a complete change in the mindset of the cultural zeitgeist. If you really zoom out, what's actually happening is an attack, a war with neoliberalism, right? Like, neoliberalism is the official claim. Other people call it woke ideology. Other people can call it Sorosism, Baitsua. Like, there's many names for it. But there is, like, a huge cultural shift against this mindset that used to be the established way of thinking up until now. And there's a new mindset coming up, which is nationalism, right? Like, we don't just notice Trump, but, like, all throughout Europe, the nationalist movement, the nationalist ideology is growing, the sovereigntist, if you will, which are basically people who feel disenfranchised by the previous way of life, that notice that their quality of living is dropping, that notice they can't talk against environmentalist policies, that notice they can't talk against migration, that notice they're constantly called racist, bigots, so on and so forth. And so, like, these people are protesting by voting, you know, the only way that they can protest, which is left. And it causes a new cultural shift, a new mindset. So you can complain, you can whine, you can nag against it, but what are you going to do about it? And so far, I don't know what Europe can do about it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you on my live stream. Link to it in the pinned comment section. Take care.